Hermes Trismegistos, a 20,000-year-old prophecy for today. Thoth the Atlantean warnings. Who was Hermes Trismegistos? Very complicated answer. However, we'll find many clues about his identity later on. For starters, we'll settle for a suggestion from the British scholar R.F. Willits, who wrote that, in many ways, Hermes is the most sympathetic, confusing, complex, and therefore most Greek of all the Olympian gods. The texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistos were formulated in ancient Egypt during the Ptolemaic years, 4th to 1st century BC. Based on ancient Egyptian wisdom, they are not the ancient Egyptian texts themselves. In their final formulation, ancient Greek thought plays a big role. However, the text of the perfect speech excerpts of which we'll see below, is perhaps the only one that received the least influence of Greek philosophy. When did Hermes Trismegistos live? When Hermes Trismegistos, or Egyptian Thoth, or even Thoth the Atlantean, lived is very difficult to determine, let alone answer with certainty. He's generally considered a mythical figure, so dating him is somewhat useless, but if we want to follow some related paths, then we have this following. Manetho, an ancient Egyptian high priest and historian, states that the books of Hermes Trismegistos were copied by well-known Moses from the Bible, who was initiated into the ancient Egyptian mysteries, having been nurtured and raised in a royal Egyptian family. As we know, he was found in the Nile River amongst the reeds, and the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh, took him and raised him as her own. He was the prince of Egypt. He was actually the prince of Ethiopia, according to the Old Testament of the Bible. So he was initiated into the ancient Egyptian mysteries, Moses that is, having been nurtured and raised in a royal Egyptian family. And according to some researchers, Moses is estimated to have lived during the time when Pharaoh was Akhenaten, around 1300 BC. The first and greatest prophet in the Greek tradition is the god Hermes, or Hermes Trismegistos, according to the Egyptian version. Among his disciples is the god Hephaestus. Hermes lived, according to others, in 9000 BC, or according to others, in 25,000 BC. But if we consider that Hephaestus was his student, who lived according to Diogenes Laertius in 50,000 BC, it means that Hermes lived before 50,000 BC. Another version, Orpheus mentions how in the beginning Uranus reigned and was succeeded by Saturn. After Saturn reigned, Zeus, that is Jupiter, and then Dionysius Olympiodorus memorandum to Phaethon in Orphics. Hermes was born from the daughter of Atlas, Maia, and served as a secretary to Saturn, brother of Atlas, a testimony that is also confirmed in the gospel preparation of Eusebius. More generally, however, the story of Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistos, Mercury, is lost back in time and in the culture of the mythical Red Egypt, a civilization that reached its peak before the final engulfment of the sinking of Atlantis. In some of the readings of Edgar Cayce, also known as the Sleeping Prophet, who gave answers to various questions while in a state of hypnotic trance, he lived 1877 to 1945. Edgar Cayce says Hermes Trismegistos, or Thoth, appears to have been an engineer from the submerged Atlantis, and that he built or designed or directed the construction of the pyramids of Egypt. Now let's remember, I do have a playlist of the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean, and he credits himself with building the pyramids of Giza, and he also says that a lot of Atlanteans escaped Atlantis before its sinking and established cities all over the world. The first thing they did was build pyramids. He also says that Hermes Thoth, that is, says that he had a spaceship that he stored or hidden under one of the sphinxes in a plateau of pyramids in Egypt. Now, we don't know if only Giza was built by him. Perhaps other areas were built by him as well in Egypt. Now, various myths want to present him as a priest of the mythical Atlantis. Moreover, that he was the one who founded the first colony of the lost continent in the land of Kem, Egypt, which he ruled for 16,000 years, exceeding the earthly limits of death. This is one reason why he is called Thoth the Atlantean. Between us, we should admit that the range between 1,300 and 50,000 BC is too long and is not easy to mark a millennium. Arbitrarily, then, we will choose to prefer that he lived and reigned somewhere between 20,000 and 25,000 years ago, as various estimates link his existence to Atlantis around that time frame. However, whenever he lived, whether as a mythical or a historical person, the texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistos are real, and they still exist today. The perfect word survived only in its Latin translation. The Greek text, hence the original, survived in its entirety at least until the 4th century AD. A comparison with the Greek passages that have survived shows that the Latin translation is in some places expands and in others becomes rather summary. The perfect speech is a dialogue made by Hermes Trismegistus to Asclepius, the father of medicine of Greece, but not the god. The name Asclepius, Tat, and Ammons that are mentioned throughout the speech do not refer to gods, but to human initiates or students who followed the teaching of Hermes Trismegistus, in which case they have been attributed to them in honor of the gods. The perfect word, and especially the part that we'll look at, is a revelatory text, the interpolation of prophecies that do not exist in other surviving Hermetic texts is impressive. They refer to Egypt where the gods dwelt and are now moving away. However, in several places it's estimated that while Egypt is the center of the discourse, the climate of the prophecy extends and beyond that, and is roughly the case with Jewish prophecies. The prophecy for today. Are you ignorant then, Asclepius, that Egypt is the copy of heaven, or rather the place where all the energies which govern and set in motion the heavenly powers are transferred and extended here? Our land is a sanctuary of the whole world. Let's remember that the Egyptian pyramids reflect the Orion constellation and the belt of Orion. And going back to this, because of ungodliness, quote, a time will come when the gods will leave the earth and go back to heaven, leaving Egypt. A barbarian neighbor will settle in Egypt. Men abandoned by the gods will all die, and then without God and people, Egypt will turn into a desert. From the blood that will be shed, the rivers will overflow, and their holy waters will also be polluted by the blood, but they will not come out of their bed, and there will be more dead than alive, end quote. And going on, quote, Egypt itself is being carried away. It will be polluted by even more serious crimes. And at that time, tired of people, tired of life, people will no longer see the world as something worthy of their admiration and respect. This whole nature, which is good, the most wonderful that anyone could see in the past, present, and future, will be in danger of destruction, and people will value it as a burden. From now on, they'll be held in contempt, and they will cease to love the whole world, the incomparable work of God. Why darkness will be preferred to light? They will judge it more useful to die than to live. No one will look up to heaven anymore. The pious will be considered mad, and the ungodly wise. The lunatic will pass for serious, and the worst criminal for good. The soul and all the beliefs associated with it will only cause laughter, and even worse, they will see in them futility. It will be a very great crime, in the legal context of the term, to be devoted to spiritual religion. A new law will be created, end quote. Hermes Trismegistus goes on to say, quote, the only ones who will remain united will be the angels of evil who mingle with men, and compel them, the unfortunate, to every excess of a daring crime, drive them to wars, to robberies, in frauds, and in all that is contrary to the nature of the soul. And then the earth will lose its balance, the sea will not be wide, there will be no stars in the sky, the heavenly voices will be forced into absolute silence, the fruits of the earth will rot, the soil will no longer be fertile, and the man will become stifling. And this will be the aging of the world, the lack of religion, the disorder, the confusion of all goods, and when all these things shall be fulfilled, the Creator will endeavor to annihilate the wickedness by wiping it out with a flood, or with a fire, or with pestilences that will spread in various places, and then he will restore the world to its former beauty, end quote. And, quote, how this rebirth of the world will take place, end quote, among other things, Thoth, the Hermes the Atlantean, stated, as for the gods whose authority is not exercised on earth, they will be replaced one day and will settle in a city at the very end of Egypt, a city that will be established towards the west of the sun, where all the races of mortals will emerge from the earth and from the sea. As to what the city that will be founded towards the west of the sun will be, many interpretations are given. In our view, and in relation of the Atlantean origin of Hermes Trismegistos, it could be South America, centered on Brazil, where according to other sources it's supposed to have been a colony of Atlantis, and still is, but underground for the survivors, such as when the Princess of Tellus uncovered the underground civilization beneath California's Mount Shasta. Other theories interpret this point as the emergence of submerged Atlantis, which will occur during the natural disaster described. Now, the reference to the earth will lose its balance seems to be a possible indication that it could refer to our time today, the near future, since indirectly it seems to imply either a reversal of the poles or the magnetic field, or something related that will seriously affect the planet and the tilt of the axis of the earth so far, an event that some scientists seem to appreciate as long overdue and expect to happen but cannot determine when it will happen. Another indication that this prophecy refers to today, but also a final conclusion that could be drawn from all of this, is that man disrespects and shows disrespect in every direction. Disrespect for ants, at least that they were perceived at the time, that is, relatives, disrespect to man himself, disrespect for concepts and human judgment, great deception, falsification, and or mental assault, which has been constantly upgraded in recent decades. Disrespect to nature were the known side effects of recent years that scientists call climate change or climate crisis. Result, the earth together with the planetary beings and deities who oversee will restore the previous order and the rebirth of all goods, but with dire consequences for humanity. Most of human civilization will disappear to be rebuilt. For the writings of the article Hermes Trismegistos, a 20,000-year prophecy for today, information was used from Gnosis Tapatalk, and finally from the Hermetic text of the background editions, the introduction of volumes A and B, as well as excerpts from the Latin text translated by Pericles Rhodakis. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.